My daughter took my car keys during Sunday brunch at the country club, standing up in front of 30 witnesses to announce that I was too old and dangerous to drive. "Mom, this is for your own safety," Susan said loudly enough for the entire dining room to hear. "After what happened in the Whole Foods parking lot, we can't risk you hurting yourself or someone else." What happened in that parking lot was a scratch on a bumper while backing out of a tight space. What my daughter didn't know was that I held a Class A commercial driver's license, had driven 18-wheelers across 48 states, and had been a certified defensive driving instructor for 23 years. By Friday, she'd receive a letter she thought was from the DMV. It had my name on it, along with a surprise that would cost her everything she'd been planning to steal. Let me take you back to where this really started, because Susan's performance at the country club wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated, rehearsed, and part of a plan she'd been building for 6 months. I'm Margaret Harris, 68 years old, widow of Thomas Harris, who died 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer. Tom and I built a good life together. He was a long-haul trucker, and I drove with him for 32 years before we both retired. Our house in Riverside, California, modest but fully paid off, recently appraised at $890,000, thanks to the insane real estate market. Tom's life insurance, his pension, and our combined Social Security gave me $4,800 monthly. Comfortable, secure, independent. Susan is our only child, 42 years old, married to Richard Pemberton, a pharmaceutical sales executive making $340,000 annually. They live in a $2.1 million house with a $12,000 monthly mortgage payment. 2 kids, Olivia 16 and Brandon 14. Private school tuition of $68,000 yearly for both children. On paper, they looked successful. In reality, they were drowning in debt from trying to maintain an image they couldn't afford. I knew this because Susan had asked to borrow money from me 4 times in the past year. First request was $15,000 for unexpected medical bills. Second was $8,000 for Brandon's summer camp. Third was $12,000 for emergency home repairs. Fourth was $20,000 for investment opportunities. I'd said no to all of them, gently, explaining that I needed to preserve my savings for my own future care. Each rejection had been met with thinly veiled resentment. The parking lot incident happened on October 3rd, 2024. I'd driven my 2019 Honda CR-V to Whole Foods for my weekly shopping, parked in a tight spot between 2 oversized SUVs. When I backed out, I misjudged the angle by maybe 3 inches and scraped the bumper of a Tesla Model X. Minor damage, maybe $400 to repair. I left a note with my insurance information, as any responsible driver would. The Tesla owner called me that afternoon, very understanding, and we handled it through insurance without incident. My premium didn't even increase because it was my first claim in 47 years. But somehow, Susan found out about it. She'd been monitoring my mail, I realized later, saw the insurance correspondence and seized on it like a gift from heaven. 2 days after the incident, Susan showed up at my house unannounced. "Mom, we need to talk about your driving." She'd brought printouts from the internet, statistics about elderly drivers, articles about cognitive decline, a pamphlet from a senior living facility. "I'm worried about you. Dad's death was traumatic, and sometimes grief affects our judgment." I looked at her carefully. This wasn't concern. This was strategy. "Susan, I scratched a bumper in a parking lot. I'm not showing signs of dementia." Her smile was patient, condescending. That's exactly what people say when they don't realize their faculties are declining. "Just last week, Mrs. Patterson told me you seemed confused at book club." Mrs. Patterson was Susan's friend, not mine. I didn't even attend book club. "Susan, I've never been to book club." She made a note on her phone. "See, that's concerning. You don't even remember going." The gaslighting had begun, though I didn't recognize it immediately. Over the next 3 weeks, Susan manufactured a narrative of my declining competence, She told Richard I'd forgotten their anniversary dinner. We'd never had plans. She told the neighbors I'd left my stove on overnight. I cook on an induction cooktop that automatically shuts off. She told my doctor's office I'd been missing appointments. I'd been to every scheduled appointment, which Dr. Morrison confirmed when I called to check. Each fabricated incident built her case, created witnesses to my supposed deterioration. But Susan made one critical mistake. She underestimated how sharp I actually was, and how thoroughly I'd document everything she was doing. October 28th was when Susan revealed her real intentions. She'd invited me to lunch at her house, just the two of us. Richard was at work, the kids at school. We sat in her pristine white kitchen with the marble countertops I knew they couldn't afford. "Mom, Richard and I have been discussing your situation." My situation. Like I was a problem to be solved. "We think it would be best if you moved in with us. Sell your house. Use the equity to help with expenses here. And you'd have full-time care." I sipped my tea, keeping my expression neutral. "What kind of expenses?" Her smile was bright, rehearsed. "Well, the guest house out back could be converted into a perfect suite for you. Just need some renovations, maybe $180,000, and of course, your share of household costs would be around $3,000 monthly. But you'd save so much by not maintaining your own home." The math was simple. My house was worth $890,000 after selling costs. I'd net around $850,000. Susan wanted $180,000 immediately for renovations, plus $3,000 monthly indefinitely. Within 3 years, she'd burned through my entire life savings while I lived in a converted garage, dependent on her generosity. I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy in my own home. Susan's smile tightened. "Mom, be realistic. You're almost 70. How much longer can you maintain a house? Do the yard work? Handle repairs? And now with your driving issues..." "I don't have driving issues. I had a minor parking incident. The insurance company disagreed. They raised your premium, didn't they?" "Another lie. My premium stayed the same, Susan." She pulled out her phone, showed me a screenshot. It appeared to be from my insurance company, stating my premium had increased by $240 monthly due to the accident. Except I'd just checked my actual policy 3 days ago. This was fabricated. That night, I made 3 important decisions. First, I'd document everything. Every conversation, every manufactured incident, every lie. Second, I'd quietly consult with my attorney, George Patterson, who'd handled Tom's estate. Third, I'd let Susan think her plan was working while I built my defense. Because what Susan didn't know about me could fill a book. She knew I'd been a truck driver's wife. She didn't know I'd been a truck driver myself, with a Class A CDL that required passing the same rigorous tests as any professional driver. She knew I was widowed and retired. She didn't know I'd spent 23 years as a certified defensive driving instructor, teaching law enforcement and commercial drivers advanced techniques. She thought I was a passive, elderly woman who'd go quietly into dependency. She had no idea who she was actually dealing with. November 1st, I visited George Patterson's office. George was 74, sharp as ever, and had known our family for 30 years. "Margaret, good to see you. What brings you in?" I laid out everything Susan had been doing. The manufactured incidents, the pressure to sell my house, the fabricated insurance documents. George listened without interrupting, taking notes in his precise handwriting. When I finished, he sat back in his leather chair. "This is elder financial abuse, Margaret. Textbook case. If she's forging documents, that's also fraud." He pulled out a legal pad. "Let's talk about protecting your assets. Have you considered a revocable living trust?" I had, actually. Tom and I had discussed it before he died, but never followed through. "What would that do?" George explained that a trust would prevent Susan from having any claim to my property, even if she somehow obtained power of attorney. The house would be owned by the trust, not by me personally, making it impossible for her to force a sale or claim financial authority. "How quickly can we set this up?" I asked. 2 weeks if we move fast. I'll need property appraisals, title work, and your signature on about 40 pages of documents." He paused, Margaret, there's something else you should know. If Susan is manufacturing evidence of your incompetence, she might be building toward a conservatorship petition. Conservatorship, where the court declares you unable to manage your own affairs and appoints someone else to make decisions for you. In Susan's case, that would give her complete control over my finances, my property, my life. How do we prevent that? George smiled. We prove you're more competent than 90% of people half your age. Medical evaluations, cognitive testing, financial competency assessments. We build a file so thorough that no judge would ever question your capacity. We spent the next 2 hours planning my defense. George would prepare the trust documents, arrange for a comprehensive medical evaluation with Dr. Morrison, and schedule cognitive testing with a neuropsychologist. I would continue documenting Susan's behavior, gather all my financial records proving my competent management, and most importantly, not reveal that I knew what she was planning. November 8th brought Susan's next move. She showed up at my house with Richard, both looking serious. Mom, we need to have a difficult conversation. Richard did most of the talking this time, probably because Susan thought I'd respond better to my son-in-law. Margaret, Susan, and I are concerned about your ability to live independently, the driving incident, the confusion about appointments, the forgetfulness. These are signs that maybe you need more support. I looked at Richard. He'd always seemed decent, though weak. Susan clearly ran their household. Richard, what specific incidents are you referring to? He glanced at Susan, who jumped in. Mom, just last Tuesday you called me 3 times asking the same question. What question? About Thanksgiving plans. You kept forgetting we'd already discussed it. I pulled out my phone, showed them my call log. I called you once last Tuesday at 2:47 p.m. The call lasted 6 minutes. We discussed the weather and Brandon's soccer game. We didn't mention Thanksgiving. Susan's face flushed. Well, maybe it was the week before. Shall we check those records too? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Look, Margaret, we're not trying to attack you. We're trying to help. By lying about phone calls that never happened, the room went quiet. Susan recovered quickly. Mom, this defensiveness is part of the problem. When someone's cognitive function declines, they often become paranoid and accusatory. She pulled out a folder. Inside were more printouts. I've been documenting your incidents for the past month. For your own protection. The list was fiction. October 12th. Left stove on for 3 hours. False. October 18th. Forgot grandson's birthday. Brandon's birthday was January 3rd, 3 months away. October 24th. Got lost driving to familiar grocery store. I'd driven to 3 different stores that day, buying specific items from each, all documented on my receipts. October 31st. Couldn't remember Richard's name during phone call. This was particularly creative since Richard and I had never spoken on October 31st. Every single incident was fabricated, but Susan had created a documentary record that looked legitimate to someone who didn't know the truth. Susan, I said calmly, these incidents never happened. Mom, please. Her voice carried that practiced patience. This is exactly what I mean. You don't remember these events because your memory is failing. Richard looked between us, clearly uncomfortable but loyal to his wife. Margaret, maybe you should see a neurologist, just to be safe. I think that's an excellent idea, I said. Susan brightened, thinking she'd won. I can make the appointment. Dr. Stevens is supposed to be very good with geriatric patients. I'll make my own appointment, thank you. With Dr. Morrison, who's been my physician for 20 years. Susan's expression darkened. Dr. Morrison is a general practitioner. You need a specialist. Then I'll ask Dr. Morrison for a referral. I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Thank you both for your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own health care. After they left, I called George immediately. They're accelerating the timeline. We need to move faster. November 15th was my comprehensive medical evaluation with Dr. Morrison. I'd explained the situation to him over the phone, and he'd agreed to conduct the most thorough assessment of my cognitive and physical health possible. The examination took 3 hours. Memory tests, reaction time assessments, problem-solving exercises, physical coordination tests. Dr. Morrison was methodical, documenting everything. "Margaret, your cognitive function is excellent. Top 5% for your age group. Your physical health is equally impressive. Blood pressure 118/74. Cholesterol levels perfect. No signs of any neurological issues." He typed notes into his computer. "I'm going to give you something that might be useful. A formal letter documenting your medical competency, suitable for legal purposes." The letter was detailed. It stated that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment, maintained excellent judgment and decision-making capacity, demonstrated superior memory function, and was fully capable of independent living and managing my own affairs. Dr. Morrison signed it, dated it, and gave me 3 copies. "Keep these somewhere safe. If your daughter tries to claim you're incompetent, this will be hard to dispute." The neuropsychological testing happened November 19th. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in cognitive assessments for elderly patients, often in cases involving conservatorship disputes. George had chosen her specifically because her evaluations were considered gold standard in California courts. The testing took 4 hours. Mathematical reasoning, verbal comprehension, spatial awareness, memory recall, executive function assessment. Some tests were deliberately challenging, designed to identify even subtle cognitive decline. When Dr. Chen reviewed my results, she smiled. "Mrs. Harris, you scored in the 93rd percentile overall. Your processing speed is faster than average for someone 30 years younger. Your memory recall is exceptional. Whatever your daughter claims about your cognitive function, these test results prove otherwise." She prepared a formal report, 8 pages of detailed analysis with graphs and percentile rankings. "I'm also noting in my report that you show no signs of any cognitive decline, maintain excellent judgment, and demonstrate financial competency well above the standard required for independent living." Another weapon in my arsenal taut. November 24th. Thanksgiving week was when Susan made her boldest move yet. She sent me a certified letter, requiring my signature for delivery. Inside was a document titled Voluntary Power of Attorney for Healthcare and Financial Decisions. The cover letter explained that, given my recent health concerns, Susan thought it would be prudent for me to grant her power of attorney so she could help manage my affairs if needed. The document was professionally prepared, probably cost her $800 from some attorney who didn't ask too many questions. If I signed it, Susan would have immediate authority to make medical decisions for me, access my bank accounts, and sell my property. The letter suggested I consult with family before signing, but urged me to act quickly for your own protection. I photographed every page, sent copies to George, and filed the originals in my safe. Susan had just provided written evidence of her intentions. George called within an hour of receiving my photos. "Don't sign anything. This is exactly what I expected. She's trying to get you to voluntarily surrender control before she has to fight for it in court." What do I do? Nothing. Ignore it completely. Let her think you're considering it. Meanwhile, I'd been working on my own surprise. On November 20th, George had finalized my revocable living trust, the Margaret Ann Harris Revocable Trust, established November 20th, 2024. I was the trustee, with full control over all assets during my lifetime. Upon my death, the trust would distribute assets to my grandchildren's educational funds, with nothing going to Susan directly. The house was transferred into the trust, meaning I no longer personally owned it. The trust did. This made it impossible for anyone to force a sale or claim rights to the property through conservatorship or power of attorney. George had also helped me restructure my bank accounts. My main checking and savings were now held in the trust's name. I maintained a small personal account with $5,000 for daily expenses, but my real assets were protected. If Susan somehow obtained power of attorney, she'd have access to $5, not $850. November 26th, Thanksgiving Day. Susan had insisted on hosting at her house. "Mom, please come. It's important for family to be together." I agreed, curious to see what she had planned. I arrived at noon bringing my famous sweet potato casserole, a recipe I'd made perfectly for 43 consecutive Thanksgivings. Susan was in full hostess mode, wearing a $600 dress and playing the devoted daughter. "Mom, you look wonderful. How are you feeling?" Richard's parents were there. Roger and Patricia Pemberton, old money from Connecticut. Susan's brother-in-law David with his wife Christina. The kids, Olivia and Brandon. 9 people total, all gathered in Susan's dining room with its crystal chandelier and china that cost more than my first car. Dinner was catered, of course, because Susan had never learned to cook. We sat down at 1 p.m., and Susan spent the first 20 minutes playing perfect hostess, making sure everyone had wine, asking about everyone's lives. Then she made her move. "Before we eat, I want to address something important." Susan stood, commanding everyone's attention. "Many of you know Mom has been having some health concerns lately." I kept my expression neutral, curious where this was going. She had a car accident a few weeks ago, and there have been some memory issues, some confusion. Richard and I have been trying to help her, but Mom's being resistant to accepting the support she needs. Patricia Pemberton made a sympathetic sound. Roger looked uncomfortable. Susan continued, "I've consulted with attorneys and healthcare professionals, and the consensus is that Mom needs more structured care. Richard and I have offered to have her move in with us, where we can ensure her safety, but she's refusing. At this point, I think we need to consider more formal arrangements." "Formal arrangements?" Roger asked. "Conservatorship," Susan said. "Legal guardianship, where someone is appointed by the court to make decisions for a person who can no longer make sound decisions for themselves. It's for Mom's own protection." The table was silent, everyone staring at me, probably seeing a declining old woman who needed help. Time to change their perspective. "Susan, that's an interesting interpretation of recent events." I kept my voice calm, pleasant. "Would you like to hear the actual facts?" Susan's smile froze. "Mom, please. You're only proving my point by being defensive." "Facts aren't defensive. They're facts." I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me. "You mentioned a car accident. What actually happened was that I scraped a bumper while backing out of a tight parking space on October 3rd at the Whole Foods on Canyon Crest. Damage was approximately $400, handled through insurance, 0 impact on my premium, and the other driver was completely satisfied with the resolution. Here's the insurance claim, showing the minor nature of the incident." I passed the document to Roger, who read it carefully. "You mentioned memory issues. I've recently undergone comprehensive neuropsychological testing with Dr. Sarah Chen. Here's her report, showing that I scored in the 93rd percentile for cognitive function, with no signs of any decline." I passed that to Patricia. "You mentioned confusion. Here's a letter from Dr. Morrison, my physician of 20 years, stating that I show excellent judgment and decision-making capacity." Susan was pale now. "Mom, those tests don't tell the whole story. There have been incidents." "Yes, let's discuss those incidents." I pulled out another document. "You claimed I left the stove on for 3 hours on October 12th. I have an induction cooktop that automatically shuts off after 30 minutes of inactivity." "Impossible to leave on for 3 hours." "You forgot Brandon's birthday." "Brandon's birthday is January 3rd. It's currently November 26th. Hard to forget something that hasn't happened yet." "You got lost driving to the grocery store." "I visited 3 different grocery stores on October 24th, purchasing specific items from each. Here are the receipts. time-stamped, showing I drove efficiently between Ralph's at 9:15 a.m., Trader Joe's at 10:02 a.m., and Whole Foods at 11:20 a.m. Richard was staring at his wife with a strange expression. "Susan, you told me Margaret had left her stove on. You showed me photos." "I'm sure I'd love to see those photos," I said, "since they'd have to be fabricated given that the incident never occurred." Susan tried to recover. "This is exactly what I mean. Mom's becoming paranoid, accusatory. Paranoid would be if I claimed you were trying to steal my house, but that would require evidence, like perhaps the letter you sent me last week requesting I sign over power of attorney, or the multiple conversations where you've pressured me to sell my home and move into your guest house after paying you $180,000 for renovations." Roger Pemberton's eyes narrowed. "Susan, what is she talking about?" I passed him the power of attorney documents. "Your daughter-in-law sent me these, requesting I voluntarily grant her control over my health care and finances. I declined, because I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." Patricia was reading Dr. Chen's neuropsychological report, her expression shocked. "Susan, these test scores are remarkable. Margaret's cognitive function is better than mine, and I'm 62. "There's one more thing everyone should know," I said. "Last week I established a revocable living trust and transferred all my assets into it. This means that even if someone obtained power of attorney through fraud or deception, they would have zero access to my property or finances. The trust is managed by me for my benefit during my lifetime. Upon my death, assets will go directly to educational funds for my grandchildren, administered by an independent trustee." The silence was absolute. Olivia and Brandon looked confused. David and Christina were staring at Susan. Richard's face had gone from confusion to something darker. Roger carefully set down the documents. "Margaret, I apologize. I think we've been given an incomplete picture of the situation." "I think Susan has been giving everyone an incomplete picture," I said. "The question is why?" Susan stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," Roger said sharply. "Sit down, Susan." His tone was one I'd never heard him use before. Susan sat. Roger looked at his son. "Richard, did you know Susan had asked Margaret to sign over power of attorney?" Richard shook his head slowly. "She told me Margaret needed help managing her affairs." "Based on what evidence?" Richard couldn't answer. Patricia spoke up. "Susan, we need to understand what's been happening here. These documents show Margaret is fully competent. The incidents you described appear to be exaggerated or false. And this request for power of attorney, combined with pressure to sell her house, looks like—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It looks like financial elder abuse." The legal term hung in the air. Susan's face was red. "How dare you! I've been trying to help my mother. By fabricating incidents of confusion, by forging insurance documents, by manufacturing a case for her incompetence." I pulled out one more item. "Here's the insurance document you showed Richard, claiming my premium increased by $240 monthly. Here's my actual insurance statement showing no increase. You created a fake document to support your narrative." Richard was staring at the two papers, comparing them. "Susan, is this true? Did you fake this?" It must have been a mistake." "A mistake requires accidentally doing something wrong. This required deliberately creating a false document." Roger stood up. "I think we should end this dinner. Margaret, I'm deeply sorry. If we'd known what was really happening, we never would have supported any of this." Patricia hugged me on their way out. "You're welcome at our home anytime. Without Susan." After Roger and Patricia left, Richard turned to his wife. "Start talking." "What the hell have you been doing?" But that conversation wasn't mine to hear. I collected my sweet potato casserole, untouched because we'd never actually eaten dinner, and drove home in my perfectly controlled, expertly operated Honda CR-V. The following Monday, November 28th, brought Susan's counterattack. She'd hired an attorney. probably expensive based on the letterhead, who sent me a formal letter claiming that my recent erratic behavior and aggressive actions during Thanksgiving dinner demonstrated that I was experiencing significant cognitive decline and paranoid delusions. The letter stated that Susan was filing for emergency conservatorship for my own protection and that a court hearing was scheduled for December 15th. I called George immediately. "They're going to court." "Good," George said. "We're ready? More than ready." He explained what would happen. Susan would have to prove to a judge that I was unable to manage my own affairs. She'd need medical evidence, witness testimony, and documentation of specific incidents. She has fabricated documents and false testimony. We have real medical evaluations, financial records, and proof of fraud. George filed a counterpetition, requesting that Susan's conservatorship attempt be dismissed with prejudice, and that she be sanctioned for filing a frivolous petition and attempting elder financial abuse. Margaret, I want your permission to go aggressive on this, not just defending you, but exposing exactly what she tried to do. I thought about my daughter, the little girl I'd raised who'd grown into someone I no longer recognized. Do it! December 3rd brought an unexpected call. Richard. "Margaret, can we talk? Just you and me?" We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Richard looked exhausted, older than his 43 years. "I need you to know I had no idea what Susan was really doing. She told me you were declining, that she was trying to help. I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was that I'd married someone who would—" He couldn't finish. "Someone who would try to defraud her own mother?" "Yes." He stirred his coffee, not drinking it. "I've been looking at our finances. We're in trouble, Margaret. $340,000 in credit card debt. The house is underwater. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Susan's been living like we're millionaires when we're actually broke." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know why she did it. Not that it's an excuse. But she was desperate, and she saw you as a solution." He pulled out his phone, showed me texts. Susan to someone named Jennifer, her sister I'd never met, discussing the plan to get me declared incompetent, sell my house, and use the proceeds to finally live the life we deserve. Richard to Susan, asking if he should be concerned about the conservatorship plan. Susan responding, "Don't worry, she'll be taken care of. Just not in her own house." "I'm filing for divorce," Richard said. "Taking the kids. I won't let them grow up thinking this kind of thing is acceptable." "What about the court hearing? I'll testify against her if you want. Everything she told me, every fabricated incident, every lie. I kept emails, texts, recordings of conversations where she discussed the plan." He met my eyes. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I should have questioned things earlier. Should have seen what she was doing. You trusted your wife. That's not a character flaw." "Maybe it should have been." We sat in silence for a moment. "Richard, what happened to her?" "She wasn't always like this." "I don't know. Somewhere along the way, keeping up with her friends became more important than being honest. Looking successful became more important than being decent. She lost herself and I didn't notice until it was too late. After Richard left, I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, thinking about the daughter I'd raised and the stranger she'd become. Grief and anger competed in equal measure, but mostly I felt relief that soon this would be over. December 15th, the conservatorship hearing at Riverside County Superior Court, Department 7. Judge Catherine Martinez presiding. Susan arrived with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Valerie Rothstein, who specialized in elder law. I arrived with George Patterson and enough documentation to fill a briefcase. The courtroom was nearly empty except for the principals. Richard sat on my side of the room, a detail Susan noticed immediately. Judge Martinez called the hearing to order at 10 a.m. "This is a petition for conservatorship filed by Susan Pemberton regarding her mother, Margaret Harris. Ms. Rothstein, you may proceed." Valerie Rothstein stood, projecting confidence. Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about her mother's welfare. Margaret Harris is 68 years old, recently widowed, and showing signs of significant cognitive decline. She had a car accident in October, has experienced multiple incidents of confusion and memory loss, and has become increasingly paranoid and resistant to help. Susan Pemberton seeks conservatorship solely to protect her mother from potential harm, financial exploitation, or accidents. Judge Martinez looked at me. Mrs. Harris, you're represented by Mr. Patterson? Yes, Your Honor. How do you respond to these allegations? George stood. Your Honor, this petition is not about protecting Mrs. Harris. It's about defrauding her. We're prepared to prove that every allegation of cognitive decline is fabricated, that Susan Pemberton has been systematically manufacturing evidence of incompetence, and that her true motive is to gain control of her mother's assets. We'll also show that Mrs. Harris is not only competent, but exceptionally capable, with cognitive function in the top 5% for her age group. Valerie Rothstein called Susan as her first witness. Susan took the stand, looking appropriately concerned and sad. Ms. Pemberton, how long have you been worried about your mother's condition? Since my father died 3 years ago. At first it was just grief, which was understandable. But over the past year it's gotten worse. Can you describe specific incidents? Susan launched into her practice narrative. The car accident, the forgotten appointments, the stove left on, the confused phone calls. Each incident delivered with perfect daughter-like concern. And when you tried to help your mother, how did she respond? She became defensive, accusatory. At our Thanksgiving dinner, she attacked me in front of my entire family, claiming I was trying to steal from her. It was heartbreaking. Valerie showed the judge Susan's incident log, the fabricated list of my supposed cognitive failures. Your Honor, this documents a clear pattern of decline over several months. George cross-examined. Ms. Pemberton, you testified that your mother left her stove on for 3 hours on October 12th. What kind of stove does she have? Susan hesitated. A regular electric stove. Actually, she has an induction cooktop that automatically shuts off after 30 minutes. So that incident couldn't have happened as you described. I must have been mistaken about the timing. You testified she forgot your son Brandon's birthday. When is Brandon's birthday? October. No, wait. January 3rd. Your mother correctly stated it. Hasn't happened yet. I meant she forgot to send a card last year. That's not what you testified. 2. George methodically destroyed each of Susan's claimed incidents, showing they were either impossible, provably false, or never happened. Ms. Pemberton, you sent your mother a power of attorney document. Why? To help her manage her affairs if needed. Did she request this help? Not explicitly, but I thought, yes or no. Did your mother ask you to manage her affairs? No, but did you tell your husband that once your mother was locked up, I believe that was your phrase, you would sell her house? Susan went pale. I never said that. George pulled out his phone, played an audio recording. Susan's voice clear as day. Once she's locked up, we sell the house, and we're finally free of this debt. The recording was from Richard, who'd been recording their arguments about finances. Susan's attorney objected. Your Honor, this recording was made without consent. In California, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation, George said. Mr. Pemberton, who made this recording, was one of the parties. It's admissible. Judge Martinez listened to the recording twice. Ms. Pemberton, do you want to revise your testimony about your motives? Susan had no answer. George called me as his witness. I explained my professional background, my commercial driver's license, my 23 years as a defensive driving instructor. I detailed my cognitive testing, my medical evaluations, my financial management. George submitted Dr. Morrison's letter, Dr. Chen's neuropsychological report, my driving record showing 0 moving violations in 50 years. and my financial statements showing meticulous management of assets. Mrs. Harris, why do you think your daughter filed this petition? Because she and her husband are over $300,000 in debt and saw my house as a solution to their financial problems. Do you love your daughter? The question caught me off guard. Yes, but I don't like who she's become. George called Richard as a witness. Richard testified about Susan's financial desperation, her manufactured evidence, her plan to get control of my assets. He provided texts, emails, and recordings of conversations where Susan explicitly discussed the conservatorship as a financial strategy. Valerie Rothstein tried to impeach his testimony as a bitter husband in divorce proceedings, but the evidence was too overwhelming. By noon, Judge Martinez had heard enough. I'm ready to rule. Ms. Rothstein, your petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning Ms. Pemberton $15,000 for filing a frivolous conservatorship petition. The evidence shows clear fraud, fabrication of evidence, and attempted financial elder abuse. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for possible criminal prosecution. She looked at Susan. Ms. Pemberton, you're fortunate your mother is declining to press charges personally. But be aware that this court takes elder abuse very seriously. If you make any further attempts to interfere with your mother's life, autonomy, or assets, you will face criminal charges. Susan left the courtroom in tears, her attorney already distancing herself from the case. Outside the courthouse, George pulled me aside. Margaret, there's something else you should know. Susan's not done yet. What do you mean? I received a tip from Richard. Susan's planning one more move. Something about a DMV letter. The DMV letter. Susan's final desperate gamble. And the one that would ultimately destroy any remaining relationship we might have salvaged. December 18th, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Official DMV letterhead. Addressed to me. Dear Mrs. Harris, following a review of your driving record and recent accident history, the California Department of Motor Vehicles has determined that your driver's license should be suspended pending a comprehensive driving evaluation. Effective immediately, you are not authorized to operate a motor vehicle on California roads. Please contact our office at 555-0147 to schedule your mandatory driving evaluation within 30 days, or your suspension will become permanent. Failure to comply may result in criminal penalties if you continue to drive. Sincerely, Robert Chen, Director of Driver Safety, California DMV. The letter looked perfect. Official seal, proper formatting. Even the signature appeared authentic. If I hadn't spent 32 years dealing with DOT regulations, commercial licensing, and state transportation departments, I might have believed it. But there were tells. The phone number had the wrong area code for the Sacramento DMV headquarters. The director's name was wrong. The actual director of driver safety was Maria Gonzalez, and had been for 6 years. The reference number format was outdated by about 8 years, and most damning, the suspension was listed as immediate, without any prior warning letters, which violated DMV procedure. Susan had gotten sloppy in her desperation. I photographed the letter from every angle, then called George. She did it. The fake DMV letter just arrived. George's voice was grim. That's a felony, Margaret. Impersonating a government agency, forging official documents. If you want to press charges, not yet. I want to see how far she takes this. What do you mean? She sent this letter expecting me to either comply and stop driving, proving I'm easily manipulated, or ignore it and drive anyway, which she'll report as me violating a suspension order. Either way, she thinks she wins. What's your plan? I smiled, looking at the letter. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants, and then I'm going to show her what happens when you underestimate someone. December 19th, I called Susan. My voice shaky, uncertain, playing the confused elderly woman she expected. Susan, I received a letter from the DMV. They're suspending my license. Oh my God, Mom, are you okay? Her concern sounded so genuine. I don't understand what happened. They said something about my accident and a driving evaluation. Don't worry, Mom. I'll help you figure this out. When did they say the suspension starts? Immediately. They said I can't drive until I complete an evaluation. Perfect relief in her voice. That's probably for the best. I know it's hard, but maybe this is a sign that it's time to make some changes. Let me handle getting your groceries, taking you to appointments. You don't need to worry about driving anymore. But I need my independence. I know, Mom. But safety comes first. We'll work through this together. After hanging up, I called the actual DMV. Driver Safety Division, this is Maria Gonzalez. Ms. Gonzalez, this is Margaret Harris. I'm a former CDL holder and certified driving instructor. I received a suspicious letter claiming to be from your office, and I'd like to report what I believe is fraud. Can you describe the letter? I read it to her. Maria's response was immediate. Mrs. Harris, that letter is completely fraudulent. We would never suspend a license without multiple prior warnings. And we never send immediate suspension notices except in cases of DUI or medical seizure. Someone is impersonating our office, which is a serious federal crime. I have the original letter. Would you like me to send it for investigation? Absolutely. I'm also going to file a report with our fraud division and notify the CHP. Do you know who might have sent this? I have suspicions. My daughter has been trying to prevent me from driving. This goes beyond family disputes. Mrs. Harris, this is criminal fraud involving a government agency, December 20th. I visited the California Highway Patrol office in Riverside. Officer David Martinez reviewed the fake DMV letter with interest. Mrs. Harris, this is well-done forgery. Whoever made this knew enough to be dangerous. But not enough to be convincing to someone who knows the system. Exactly. He made copies. We'll open an investigation. In the meantime, your actual license is valid, correct? Valid through 2027. I also hold a Class A CDL with passenger and hazmat endorsements. Officer Martinez looked up sharply. You have a commercial license? Renewed it 6 months ago. Passed all the tests, medical evaluation, everything. That requires pretty rigorous testing. 2 written exams, a comprehensive driving test with a 40-foot vehicle, and a medical certification. I scored 98% on the written and 100% on the driving portion. He studied me with new respect. Mrs. Harris, someone trying to claim you're an unsafe driver is going to have a hard time when you hold one of the most demanding licenses we issue. That's what I'm counting on, officer. He smiled. I like you. Let me know if you need any testimony about your actual driving competency. I had my 3rd official ally. December 22nd was my favorite part. I called Susan again, voice even shakier. Susan, I'm scared. I don't know what to do about this DMV thing. Mom, don't panic. Let me come over and we'll figure it out together. She arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a folder. I've been doing some research. There are facilities that specialize in helping elderly drivers who can no longer operate vehicles safely. Retirement communities, senior living, memory care, all the same places she'd been pushing before. The advantage is they provide transportation, so you don't need to worry about driving. And many of them have activities, social programs. But I'd have to sell my house. We've talked about this. The house is too much for you to manage alone anyway. This DMV situation just confirms it's time. I let tears fill my eyes. Real tears of anger that she mistook for fear. I don't want to lose my independence. Susan hugged me, and I felt her satisfaction. You're not losing independence, Mom. You're gaining safety. Let me help you. Let me handle the DMV, find you a good facility, manage the house sale. You can trust me. Trust. The word was ashes in my mouth. Okay, I whispered. I'll think about it. After she left, I called George. She took the bait. She thinks the fake DMV letter worked. Ready for phase 2? More than ready. December 27th, I received a real letter from the DMV. This one was legitimate. I'd requested it specifically. Dear Mrs. Harris, in response to your inquiry regarding advanced driver certifications, We are pleased to confirm your eligibility for the California Master Driver Instructor Program. Your application, combined with your 47 years of accident-free driving, Class A CDL certification, and previous instructor credentials, meets all requirements. Please contact our office to schedule your certification examination. Upon successful completion, you will be authorized to provide professional driving instruction for all license classes in California. Congratulations on your continued commitment to road safety. Sincerely, Maria Gonzalez, Director of Driver Safety, California Department of Motor Vehicles. I'd been planning this for 3 weeks, ever since Susan's first attempts to take my car keys. The Master Driver Instructor certification was the highest level of driving instruction in California, requiring extensive testing and documentation. I'd applied in November, and now the approval had arrived. Beautifully timed. I photocopied this letter and filed it next to Susan's fake one. The contrast would be educational. January 3rd, 2025, Susan called with news. Mom, I found a wonderful place. Sunset Gardens Senior Living Community. Beautiful facilities, full service care. And they have an opening. We should tour it this week. How much does it cost? $6,800 monthly, but it includes everything. Meals, activities, transportation, housekeeping. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. $6,800 monthly meant $8,600 annually. My Social Security and pension were $5,600 yearly. The difference would come from selling my house, exactly as Susan planned. That seems expensive. It's an investment in your safety, Mom. And honestly, after that DMV letter, you don't have much choice. You can't drive. You can't maintain your house alone. This is the solution. Let me think about it. Mom, they won't hold the spot forever. You need to make a decision. That evening, I made the call I'd been anticipating for weeks. Susan, I've decided you're right. I can't keep fighting this. I'll tour the facility, and if it's appropriate, I'll move there. Her relief was palpable. Mom, that's wonderful. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. I'll schedule the tour for Friday, and we can start the paperwork to sell your house. There's one thing I want, though. Anything, Mom. A family dinner. One last meal in my house before I leave it. Everyone together. You, Richard, the kids, your in-laws if they'll come. This weekend. I want to say goodbye to my home properly. Susan hesitated. I'm not sure Richard and I are in a place to... Please, Susan. Whatever's happening between you two, I'd like one final family gathering. She agreed. Saturday, January 8th, 6 p.m. at my house. The last supper, in a sense. I spent the next 3 days preparing. Not just cooking, though I made enough food for 20 people, but preparing the other elements of my final performance. Friday afternoon, I visited Office Depot and printed documents. 42 pages, multiple copies, organized in clear folders with tabs. I set up my laptop, connected it to my television with an HDMI cable, prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I arranged chairs in my living room like a courtroom, called Officer Martinez and confirmed he'd attend, called George Patterson and confirmed he'd attend, called Maria Gonzalez from the DMV, and she agreed to send a representative. I even called Dr. Morrison and Dr. Chen, my medical experts. Both agreed to come. Susan thought this would be a quiet family dinner where she'd pressure me into finalizing the move to Sunset Gardens. She had no idea she was walking into an intervention of a different kind. Saturday morning I cooked. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, homemade rolls, apple pie. The same meal I'd made for Christmas dinners for 43 years. The house smelled like family, like memory, like home. Everything Susan was trying to take from me. PM. Guests started arriving. Richard came first with Olivia and Brandon, the kids hugging me cautiously, confused about why their parents were separated and why everything had changed. Roger and Patricia Pemberton arrived next, formally polite, clearly uncomfortable. Margaret, thank you for inviting us despite everything. We're still family, I said simply. Officer Martinez arrived in civilian clothes, followed by George Patterson. Dr. Morrison came with his wife. Maria Gonzalez sent her deputy director, James Watkins, who looked curious about why he'd been invited to a family dinner. Susan arrived last at 6:20, saw the crowd, and stopped in the doorway. "Mom, what is this? I thought it was just family." "It is family," I said, "and some people who've been helping me protect myself from someone I used to consider family." Her face went white. "Everyone, please sit down. Dinner will wait. First, we need to have a conversation." I stood at the front of my living room, facing 15 people arranged in chairs. "Thank you all for coming. Some of you know parts of this story, but nobody knows all of it. Tonight, you're going to learn everything." I turned on the television, displayed the first slide of my presentation. For the past 6 months, my daughter Susan has been conducting a systematic campaign to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could gain control of my assets. Specifically, my house valued at $890,000. Slide 2 showed Susan's fabricated incident log. These are the incidents Susan documented as evidence of my cognitive decline. Every single one is false. I went through each incident methodically. The stove that couldn't be left on because of automatic shutoff, the birthday that hadn't happened yet, the drive I'd actually completed perfectly. For each claim, I showed contradicting evidence. Receipts, photos, witness statements. Slide 8 showed the power of attorney documents Susan had sent me. This was Susan's first legal attempt to gain control. When I refused to sign it, she escalated. Slide 10 showed the fake DMV letter. This letter arrived December 18th. It claims to be from the California DMV, suspending my license immediately. I turned to James Watkins. "Mr. Watkins, is this letter legitimate?" He examined it carefully. "No, this is forgery. The format is wrong. The director's name is wrong. The procedures described violate DMV protocol. This is criminal impersonation of a government agency." Susan tried to speak. "Let me finish," I said calmly. Slide 12 showed texts between Susan and her friend Jennifer, discussing the conservatorship plan. Richard had provided these. "Once she's locked up, we sell everything and finally get out of debt. Mom won't know what hit her." Susan's actual words. Slide 14 showed financial records. Susan and Richard are $340,000 in debt. Their house is underwater. They're 3 months behind on mortgage payments. My house represented their solution. Patricia Pemberton was staring at Susan with horror. Roger looked ill. The kids were confused but starting to understand. Now let me show you who Susan was actually trying to declare incompetent. Slide 16 showed my commercial driver's license. This is a Class A CDL with passenger and hazmat endorsements. Requires passing 3 written exams, a comprehensive driving test with a 40-foot vehicle, a complete medical evaluation including vision, hearing, and cardiovascular testing, and background checks for hazmat certification. I passed all tests within the past 6 months. Officer Martinez spoke up. Mrs. Harris scored 98% on written exams and 100% on the driving test. Those are exceptional scores for any age. Slide 18 showed Dr. Chen's neuropsychological evaluation. Cognitive function in the 93rd percentile, memory, processing speed, and executive function, all well above average. Slide 20 showed Dr. Morrison's letter. Medical competency confirmed. No signs of any cognitive impairment. Slide 22 was my recent employment offer. 3 weeks ago, I was offered a position as lead instructor at Riverside Driving Academy, teaching advanced defensive driving and commercial vehicle operation. The offer came with a salary of $62,000 annually. I start February 1st. The room was silent. Susan looked like she might be sick. "So to summarize," I said, "Susan tried to declare incompetent a woman who holds commercial driving credentials, passed comprehensive cognitive testing, maintains perfect physical health, and has just been hired to teach professional drivers." I turned off the presentation, faced my daughter directly. "Susan, you sent me a fake government letter thinking I was too confused to recognize fraud. You fabricated medical incidents thinking I wouldn't document the truth. You pressured me to sign over power of attorney thinking I was too weak to refuse. You filed for conservatorship thinking I wouldn't fight back. Every step of the way you underestimated me. Not because I was actually incompetent, but because you wanted me to be incompetent. It was convenient for you. Profitable for you. Solved your financial problems at the expense of my freedom. Tears were running down Susan's face, but I felt no sympathy. I loved you enough to sacrifice everything to give you opportunities. You loved me so little that you were willing to lock me away in a facility for the rest of my life to solve your debt problems. That's not a daughter. That's a thief. George Patterson stood. Susan Pemberton, I'm formally notifying you that Mrs. Harris is filing a restraining order preventing you from contact. Additionally, the fake DMV letter constitutes fraud, forgery, and impersonation of a government agency. The CHP and DMV are pursuing criminal charges. Officer Martinez added, Ms. Pemberton, you should expect to be contacted by investigators within the week. The charges are serious. Potential federal crimes involving government impersonation. Susan found her voice. Mom, please. I was desperate. The debt. The pressure. Richard losing his job. Richard didn't lose his job. Richard interrupted. I still have my job. You spent us into this hole chasing a lifestyle we couldn't afford. And when I tried to cut back, you screamed at me for embarrassing you in front of your friends. He looked at his children. Kids, pack your things. We're leaving. Richard, wait. Susan grabbed his arm. He pulled away. I'm done, Susan. Done with the lies, the manipulation, the debt. I'm filing for divorce Monday morning. Full custody. You can visit the kids supervised once you get help for whatever's broken in you that made you think this was acceptable. Roger and Patricia stood. Susan, you're no longer welcome in our home. Roger said, what you've done is unconscionable. They left without another word. Susan stood alone in my living room, everyone else having moved away from her like she was contagious. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're sorry you got caught, not sorry for what you did. Please, I'm your daughter. No, I said quietly. My daughter died somewhere along the way to becoming you. The girl I raised would never have done this. I don't know who you are anymore. Officer Martinez stepped forward. Ms. Pemberton, I need you to come with me. We have some questions at the station. Susan left in handcuffs, still crying, still insisting it had all been a misunderstanding. After everyone else left, only Richard remained with Olivia and Brandon. Margaret, I'm sorry. I should have seen this earlier. You trusted your wife. That's not wrong. Brandon spoke up, his 14-year-old voice cracking. Grandma, are you really going to teach driving? Starting next month. Want to learn stick shift when you turn 15? He smiled for the first time that evening. That would be awesome. Olivia hugged me. I'm glad you're okay. Mom made it sound like you were really sick. I'm healthy as a horse, and I'm not going anywhere. After they left, I sat in my quiet house, eating pot roast alone, looking at the documents spread across my dining room table. 42 pages of evidence, 6 months of documentation, all to prove I was competent to live my own life. February 1st, 2025, my first day at Riverside Driving Academy. The owner, Marcus Chen, showed me my office. Small but professional, with a window overlooking the practice lot. Margaret, we're excited to have you. Your credentials are impressive and frankly, having a 68-year-old woman as lead instructor sends a powerful message about who can be a skilled driver. My first student was a nervous 17-year-old girl named Amy, taking her commercial permit test. Mrs. Harris, what if I'm not good enough? Then we'll practice until you are. Age doesn't determine competence. Neither does gender. Only skill and knowledge matter. By the end of the day, I'd taught 3 students, reviewed 4 driving evaluations, and scheduled a defensive driving workshop for local police officers. Driving home in my Honda CR-V, I thought about Susan's fake DMV letter, the one that claimed I was unsafe to operate a vehicle. The irony was delicious. March 15th brought legal resolution. Susan pleaded guilty to fraud, forgery, and attempted financial elder abuse. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in county jail, suspended pending 3 years probation, $50,000 in fines, mandatory counseling, and permanent restraining order keeping her at least 500 yards from me. Ms. Pemberton, Judge Martinez said, you tried to destroy your mother's life for financial gain. The only reason you're not going to prison is because your mother requested leniency. She's a better person than you deserve. Richard's divorce was finalized April 3rd. He got full custody, the house despite its underwater mortgage, and freedom from Susan's debt. Susan got supervised visitation every other weekend, and a court order to seek psychiatric treatment. Margaret, Richard told me over coffee, the kids want to know if they can still see you. I told them that's entirely up to you. They're my grandchildren. Of course they can see me. Even after everything Susan did. They're not responsible for their mother's choices. They're just kids trying to understand why their family fell apart. Olivia and Brandon started visiting every Sunday. I taught Brandon stick shift in my old truck, helped Olivia with college applications, showed them both that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about showing up and being honest. May 20th, I received a letter from Susan, written from her court-mandated counseling program. Mom, I've been working with a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. She says I have narcissistic tendencies combined with financial anxiety disorder, that I saw you as an object, not a person, a solution, not my mother. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I finally understand what I almost destroyed. Not just your life, but my own soul. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. I read the letter 3 times, filed it in my safe, didn't respond. Some wounds don't heal with words. Today, I'm sitting in my house that Susan tried to steal, eating dinner I cooked myself, planning tomorrow's driving lessons. I'm 68 years old, employed, healthy, independent, and more competent than most people half my age. Every morning I make coffee in my kitchen, the one Susan claimed I couldn't safely use. I drive my CRV to work, the vehicle Susan said I was too dangerous to operate. I teach students half my age how to drive 18-wheelers, the job Susan said I was too old to perform. I manage my finances, my health care, my property, my life, all the things Susan said I couldn't do. The fake DMV letter is framed in my office at Riverside Driving Academy, labeled Motivation. Students ask about it sometimes. I tell them the story, how someone tried to take my independence by forging a government document, how I fought back with documentation, evidence, and professional competency, how I proved that age doesn't determine capability. The real DMV letter, the one approving my master driver instructor certification, hangs next to it. The contrast tells the whole story. Someone thought I was too incompetent to drive. The state of California thought I was qualified to teach others how to drive professionally. Guess who was right? Susan gets out of jail in 3 months. She's required to complete her probation and counseling before she can attempt any contact with me. Richard says she's different now, humbled, working a retail job to pay off her fines. The kids see her supervised visits, report that she cries a lot and talks about how sorry she is. Maybe she's genuinely changed. Maybe the consequence of almost destroying her mother taught her something about empathy and consequences. Maybe not. I don't know. And honestly don't care. She's not my problem anymore. Roger and Patricia Pemberton visited last month. Brought wine and apologies. Margaret, we raised her. Whatever made her think this behavior was acceptable, it came from somewhere. We're sorry we didn't see it. You saw who she pretended to be. I saw who she actually was. Neither of us is responsible for her choices. Patricia hugged me. You're a remarkable woman. The strength it must have taken to document everything. Fight back? Prove your competence while someone was actively trying to declare you incompetent. It wasn't strength. It was survival. She didn't leave me a choice. But that's not entirely true. I had choices. I could have given in, signed over power of attorney, moved to Sunset Gardens, let Susan have my house and my independence. Plenty of elderly people do exactly that, worn down by family pressure and self-doubt. I chose differently because Tom taught me to never surrender to people who underestimate you. Because 32 years on the road taught me that competence isn't about age. It's about skill. Because 50 years of driving taught me that the most dangerous thing on the road isn't an elderly driver. It's someone who's not paying attention. June 1st, 3 months after the court case, something unexpected happened. I was teaching a class on hazard perception when Marcus Chen pulled me aside. "Margaret, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." In the waiting area sat a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. "Mrs. Harris? I'm Jennifer Walsh from the California Department of Motor Vehicles, Elder Driver Safety Division. I wanted to meet you in person. My first thought was that Susan had filed another complaint. Is there a problem?" "Quite the opposite. Your case with your daughter, the fake suspension letter, the legal battle to prove your competence. It's become somewhat famous in DMV circles. We'd like to offer you a position as consultant." "Consultant for what?" Jennifer opened her briefcase. "We get about 1,500 complaints annually from family members claiming their elderly relatives are unsafe to drive. Some are legitimate, but we estimate about 30% are like your situation. Family members using driving competency as leverage for other goals. We need someone who understands both sides. Someone who can evaluate whether an elderly driver is actually unsafe or whether they're being manipulated." "You want me to investigate elder driving complaints? We want you to develop a protocol for distinguishing genuine safety concerns from financial abuse disguised as safety concerns. Your documentation of Susan's fraud was textbook. You proved your competency through testing rather than just defensiveness. We want to teach other elderly drivers to do the same." The position would be part-time, 20 hours weekly, $45 per hour. I'd evaluate complaint letters, interview family members, assess actual driving competency, and help develop educational materials for seniors facing license challenges. "I'd also like you to speak at our annual conference in August," Jennifer said. "Share your story. Show our staff and the public that age doesn't equal incompetence." I accepted on the spot. My daughter tried to steal my license to steal my house. Now I'd spend my time helping other elderly drivers protect both. Poetic justice doesn't cover it. August 12th, California DMV Annual Safety Conference, San Diego Convention Center. I stood on stage in front of 800 people, department employees, law enforcement, senior advocacy groups. "My name is Margaret Harris. 6 months ago, my daughter tried to have me declared mentally incompetent and sent me a fake DMV letter claiming my license was suspended. She thought I was too old, too confused, and too weak to fight back. She was wrong about all three. I showed them the fake letter, explained how I'd identified the forgery, detailed my process of proving competency through testing rather than arguing, showed them my CDL, my cognitive evaluations, my medical clearances. The question isn't whether elderly drivers can be unsafe. Some are. The question is whether we're evaluating individuals based on actual competency or based on assumptions about age. I pulled up statistics. Drivers over 65 have lower accident rates than drivers aged 16 to 25. They're more likely to wear seat belts, less likely to drive impaired, and more likely to follow traffic laws. Yet they face more scrutiny, more family pressure, and more assumptions about their declining abilities. The presentation ran 45 minutes, standing ovation at the end. Afterwards, 3 different news outlets requested interviews. The story of a grandmother who held a commercial license, taught professional drivers, and defeated her daughter's attempt to declare her incompetent, made good television. Good Morning America ran a segment titled Grandma Fights Back. 60 Minutes included my story in an episode about elder financial abuse. Susan's mugshot appeared in several broadcasts. identified as the daughter who'd tried to defraud her competent mother. I didn't enjoy her humiliation, but I didn't regret it either. Actions have consequences. Public actions have public consequences. September brought Susan's release from jail. 3 months served. Probation activated. Restraining order still in effect. Richard told me she'd moved to Arizona, working as a cashier at Target, living in a studio apartment. She asks about you sometimes, he said. Wants to know if there's any chance of reconciliation. What do you tell her? That she destroyed that chance when she tried to lock you in a nursing home to steal your house. Good answer. October 3rd, exactly 1 year after the Whole Foods parking lot incident that started everything. I drove to that same parking lot, parked in that same tight spot between 2 oversized SUVs, backed out perfectly without touching either vehicle. Small victory, but satisfying. Today is December 22nd, 2025. 2 years since Susan whispered to Danny about kicking me out after Christmas. 1 year since the fake DMV letter arrived. I'm sitting in my living room, the house Susan tried to steal, drinking coffee from my stove she claimed I couldn't safely use. Tomorrow I'll drive to work in the vehicle she said I was too dangerous to operate. I'll teach students the skills she said I didn't possess. I'll consult with the DMV on cases like mine. I'm 70 years old now, still sharp, still healthy, still independent. My Social Security increased to $2,000 monthly. My pension stayed stable at $2,700. My driving instructor salary adds $4,800. My DMV consulting brings another $3,600. Total income, $13,200 monthly. More than double what I had when Susan started her campaign. The house Susan wanted to steal is now worth $940 of her. The trust protecting it is ironclad. Upon my death, it'll fund scholarships for elderly people seeking commercial driver's licenses. The Margaret Harris Second Career Fund. Helping seniors prove that age doesn't mean the end of competency. Susan will inherit nothing, by design. She tried to steal everything, so she gets nothing. Richard and the kids will be fine without my money. They'll have memories of Sunday dinners, stick shift lessons, honest conversations. That's worth more than any inheritance. Christmas is in 3 days. Olivia and Brandon are coming over. Richard, too. We'll eat pot roast and mashed potatoes. The same meal I made the night I exposed Susan's fraud. We'll laugh and talk and pretend the past 2 years didn't fracture our family forever. Because that's what family does. Not the family you're born into, the one Susan represented. But the family you choose, the one that shows up honestly. I got a Christmas card from Susan yesterday, mailed from Phoenix. Mom, I'm sorry. Every day I'm sorry. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do it again. Merry Christmas. I love you, Susan. I read it once, put it in a drawer, didn't respond. Some gifts arrived too late to be opened. My daughter took my car keys during Sunday brunch and thought that was the end of my independence. She didn't realize that taking my keys would make me prove I deserved them. She didn't realize that attacking my competence would make me document my capabilities. She didn't realize that underestimating me would become the biggest mistake of her life. The fake DMV letter sits framed in my office. A daily reminder. Someone thought I was too old and confused to recognize fraud. Instead, I recognized it, documented it, reported it, and turned it into criminal charges. Someone thought I couldn't fight back. Instead, I fought back so effectively that I ended up working for the very agency she'd tried to impersonate. Someone thought age meant weakness. Instead, I proved that 70 years of experience makes you sharper, not duller, stronger, not weaker, more capable, not less. The last lesson Susan learned, the one that cost her everything. Never underestimate a woman who's been driving trucks across America for 32 years. Never assume confusion in someone who holds commercial credentials. Never mistake patience for weakness or kindness for stupidity. I'm Margaret Harris. I'm 70 years old. I drive professionally, teach commercially, and live independently. My daughter tried to take that away from me. She failed. I didn't just defend my independence. I expanded it. Didn't just keep my house. I made it stronger through a trust. Didn't just prove my driving competence. I turned it into 3 separate jobs. Susan wanted to diminish me. Instead, she forced me to prove just how capable I actually was. And that documentation of my capabilities, created to defend against her attacks, opened doors I'd never imagined. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's what you become despite them. Susan tried to lock me away in Sunset Gardens Senior Living. Instead, I'm teaching the next generation of professional drivers, consulting for the DMV on elder competency, and living proof that age is just a number. She wanted me helpless. I became more powerful. She wanted me dependent. I became more independent. She wanted me silent. I became a public speaker. Every attempt she made to diminish me instead amplified my capabilities. That's the real story. Not that a daughter betrayed her mother, but that a mother refused to be diminished by that betrayal, refused to accept the narrative of incompetence, refused to surrender to ageist assumptions, and in refusing became stronger than she'd been before. Tomorrow I'll wake up at 6, make coffee in my kitchen, read the newspaper in my living room, drive my car to my job. All the things Susan said I couldn't do. All the things she tried to prevent. All the things I'll continue doing until the day I choose to stop. Not the day someone else decides I should stop. Not the day some fake letter demands I stop. The day I choose. Because that's what independence means. Not the absence of challenges, but the refusal to surrender to them. Not the absence of people who underestimate you, but the determination to prove them wrong. Not the absence of betrayal, but the strength to survive it and thrive anyway. My daughter tried to steal my car keys, my house, my independence, and my life. She failed at all 4. And in failing, she gave me something unexpected. Motivation to prove every assumption about elderly incompetence wrong. Platform to help others facing similar attacks. Purpose to turn my experience into protection for others. Susan's betrayal, intended to destroy me, instead gave me the greatest gift of my later years. A reason to fight back so thoroughly that I became an example for others. A story so compelling that it changed DMV policy. A victory so complete that it redefined what 70 years old means. She tried to write my ending. Instead, she gave me a whole new beginning. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's not bitterness. That's growth. That's not weakness surviving. That's strength multiplying. I'm Margaret Harris. Someone tried to take my keys. I took their credibility instead. And I'm still driving.